or comment? Yes, John, please.
Let me philosophize a little bit on what you have said. If you were almighty and you had to choose between the survival of biosphere without Homo sapiens or biosphere with Homo sapiens, assuming that Homo sapiens is a cancer of biosphere, what would you choose? You have been very optimistic about the Homo sapiens in the presentation.
I would certainly choose biosphere with Homo sapiens. Our species has amazing extra potentials from other species of consciousness and creativity and artistic expression, and the diversity of the mind is expressed to its fullest extent in our species, although there are so many of us now that we're losing other species at the expense of our own. But the principles of sustainability and sustainable development have a theoretical solution which can include both humans and other species in a future world, in a sustainable future world. So that it's not a question of either or, it's a question of both. And we can't survive without the other species, so it has to be either both or just ecology. It can't be just humans.
Don't you think that after or behind this category of sustainable development, there's hidden a certain thought about what we want to sustain: human consumerism or biosphere?
Well, like I said, the competing ultimate collective aims of human behaviour would be human survival or biosurvival. Non-human actors won't be voting, so I suspect that human survival would be the one that we would concentrate on, but in fact biosurvival is a prerequisite to human survival, and humans are just a component of that.
Yeah, I'm just picking up on the last point, whether to apply the technologies. You stopped at that level. I'm just trying to raise a question further to that. There is a theory of known unknowns in technology assessment. There are knowns, and there are knowns that are unknowns. So to test those unknowns, you need to apply the technology. Then you would know what are the unknowns. So,
unfortunately, the potential scale of technology since the nuclear age and in the future may be greater than the scale of the Earth itself in its risks, and some things we don't want to know. Curiosity killed the cat, and humans are intensely curious, and they get intensely interested in their own projects, but we're headed potentially with the convergence of technologies upon each other and the cumulative risks and impacts of that convergence, especially with biology. Potentially we're headed towards a spike or a singularity of convergence beyond which prediction becomes impossible, and the unknown, although may have magnificent positive beneficial effects for humanity, the risks also of that unknown area beyond the spike future technology may be proportionately risky to the benefits.
And another thing, there's the risk. You stopped at risk analysis and risk assessment, but you did not include risk management. And why is it so for environmental impact assessment?
Well, the risk analysis and risk assessment are methods used for risk management, and management is the ultimate goal of sustainable development. Management, monitoring, making sure that things are going the right way, and the tools and techniques used for management are some of the ones that I mentioned there. And if we were able to quantify these things, we can better manage them.
Thank you very much, Morgan. Thank you. We have one more paper before lunch, but I think we'll come back to consider the seriousness of ethics during this conference, I hope. Okay, so Wardatul Akmam is from Bangladesh, and she's going to talk about environmental friendly ethics. Thank you.
Honorable moderator and respected delegates, good, maybe it's afternoon already and we're all waiting for lunch, so I'll try to limit my speech as much as I can. As you can see, the topic of my presentation is Inculcation of Environment-Friendly Ethics as a prerequisite for sustainable development in Bangladesh. And as far as I have heard the presentations today, a lot have been said already in the various papers that have been presented so far. But still, I'll present my views on, especially on the basis of the context of Bangladesh. As the title suggests, the main theme of my paper is that environmental ethics must be inculcated within the mental setup of individuals if we expect them to act in environment-friendly ways at all levels, as an individual, as a guardian, a policy planner, and so on. So the points that I'd like to discuss are the definition of environmental ethics, the meaning of sustainable development, the concept of sustainable living, major environmental concerns in Bangladesh, and in emphasizing that inculcation of environmental friendly ethics is essential for people of all walks of life to behave in ways suitable for sustainable development, I'd like to emphasize on the agencies of inculcating environment-friendly ethics. So I'm not going to go very deep into the definition of environmental ethics. In general, it is a system, it is a systematic account of the moral relations between human beings and their natural environments. And it mainly refers to the human attitudes and values that influence individual behavior and government policy towards nature. However, as far as the definition of environment is concerned, there is also a cultural element within environment. So I think we should also include the cultural element, because without the cultural element, we cannot unify humans to the nature completely. As has been already discussed, anthropocentrism. There are two categories of environmental ethics, and these are anthropocentrism and non-anthropocentrism. In between these two is the prudential or enlightened anthropocentrism, which considers protection of the environment at a greater level as necessary for sustained existence and good living of humans of the present generation, as well as those who are to come. So this is sort of a middle point between anthropocentrism that considers non-human world as means to the ends of humans, and non-anthropocentrism, which considers human and non-human world as parts of the moral universe, both having intrinsic value. Ideally, non-anthropocentrism is preferable, but maybe practically, for the purpose of the points that I'm trying to establish, prudential or anthropocentrism might be more applicable. About the definition of sustainable development, it is a continuing process of mediation among social, economic, and environmental needs, which results in positive socio-economic change that does not undermine the ecological and social systems upon which communities and societies are dependent. And sustainable development planning should always follow the principles of minimizing waste, minimizing generation of pollution, and maximizing recycling. Before achieving the target of sustainable development, I think it's better if we can adhere to sustainable living, which has been defined by Cato as a new way of life and approach to social and economic activities for all societies, rich and poor, which is compatible with the preservation of the environment. And the ethics compatible with sustainable living are to refrain from killing, to consider that all living organisms have intrinsic value of their own, and to consume only to such extent that is necessary to meet one's basic needs. Moreover, to study nature with a deep sense of humility and wonder, and the tools of and to use the tools of science and technology for the well-being of humans and nature. Now I come to the context of Bangladesh. Development in Bangladesh has been taking place both in the sectors of agriculture, through modernization of agriculture and through some industrialization. However, regarding environment, we haven't been very much careful, and I'd like to show through this diagram that having people at the top, we are trying to ensure development within a certain environment using natural resources that are derived from our environment. So we want development for the people using the environment, but again, we want to preserve the environment so that the next generations to come can also fulfill their needs, and they can also have a chance to develop themselves. The environmental issues in Bangladesh that are related to development are mainly population growth. There are more than 140 million people in Bangladesh with a growth rate of 1.8. So in order to just to give them food, we need to modernize agriculture, and without that it wouldn't have been possible to feed these people. And for this purpose, overuse of the natural resources occur, and for that we have for example, depletion of forest resources, and unplanned urbanization also. Some other issues include natural hazards, changing patterns and overuse of land, improper use of water resources, non-environment friendly industrialization, air pollution and noise pollution, which are mainly characteristic of Dhaka city, our capital, and also sea level rise. Sea level rise is a consequence of greenhouse effect, which we are threatened by, but we are not really very much responsible for the greenhouse effect. And that's why, as I'm going to emphasize later, that a global effort is needed even to ensure sustainable development in Bangladesh, because this sea level rise is going to affect Bangladesh severely, as the whole country is mainly about 5 meters above sea level. So if only 1 meter rise occurs, then a lot of the land is going to be submerged. Now I come to the main theme, that is inculcation of environment-friendly ethics. That is, all these problems, maybe not all of them, but most of them can be solved if people at all walks of life can be environment conscious. If we can inculcate the ethics, environmental ethics within themselves, they're not going to do anything that is not environment friendly. And the agencies that help to do this, Professor Aruna has already discussed the role of education, and I think that is going to help us a lot in to understand in detail, so I'm not going to go into detail discussing that point. But the first point that I'd like to discuss is the family. The family is the institution or the group to which a baby is born. It follows the members, the parents, and also the elder siblings. If the baby finds the members of the family to act in environmental friendly ways, if they don't waste water, if they are careful towards trees and the nature, then they themselves also become environment friendly persons, and this ethics is inculcated automatically from the very childhood. Also in this regard comes the function of peer group. People are always related to their peer groups, and the members of the peer group can help to a great extent in inculcating these types of environmental ethics. For example, if one influential member says that this is the right thing to do, all the others are likely to follow him or her. Religion is another agent, and this also has been discussed. In Bangladesh, most of the people are Muslims and followed by Hindus. In both these religions, protection of the environment is very much emphasized. Because God has created this world, we are His representatives. As His representatives, we have the duty to preserve what God has created. So this is the main theme or main belief of the religion, but it's not really inculcated within the minds of the people so that they can act in ways that can be environment friendly. So it is necessary that these religious preachers or religious personalities, they can emphasize on these aspects of preserving the environment in order to prevent the environment so that people can act in environment friendly ways. And nowadays the mass media are also playing a great role in advertisement and also in changing people's attitudes and also their actions. So these are the main agencies through which we can inculcate environment-friendly ethics and make sure that people act in environment-friendly ways. So in conclusion, I'd like to reiterate that inculcation and practice of ethics suitable for protecting the environment is essential for sustainable development. Sustainable management of environment resources and other means of sustainable development require this as a prerequisite. It is only our innate urge to save our planet that can ensure environment-friendly behavior by all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to ask a question? Okay.
You on your presentation and information, I would like to ask you to what extent it is possible for your country to practice it, and to what extent you are practicing what you have been saying.
To what extent we are practicing, as you have seen that the issues that are environmental issues related to development, these are, I think, most of them can be resolved by humans. As far as education is concerned, through education, the curriculum is not yet set up in that manner. Maybe in the future it's going to be set up in that direction. And religion, I think it can be an effective agent, but as I said, that these are all possibilities, but I don't think they have been taken into active consideration. but need to be taken into consideration for the future. Thank you.
A couple of words of explanation first. Why am I talking about nanotechnology at a biotech or bioethics conference? A couple of reasons. One is that in a lot of the new technology now, or discussions of it, when we get to talking about very little things, which we do in nanotech, people are starting to talk about converging technologies. And the converging technologies traditionally are biotech, nanotech, infotech, and cognitive science or AI, something in that general sort of area. That's one reason. The second reason is that two of the examples that I'm going to be talking about in nanotech concern the environment. The third one doesn't, but two of them do. The next one, isn't it? Oh yes, this one. Thanks. You know, why talk about the precautionary principle in general? And this talk is going to be basically theoretical rather than applied. One reason to talk about it is that people involved in nanotech, as well as in environmental science and other areas, talk about it. But one of the reasons too, and that's my main interest at this stage, is that the precautionary principle is extremely controversial, and there tend to be two main camps, and in the Western world anyway, the camps are basically the precautionary principle people are in continental Europe, and the anti-precautionary principle people are by and large in the US. Now, there are a lot of people who are on the other side of the fence in both places, but it does tend to, in the Western world, split up in that way. And when you read a lot of continental material, it'll be assumed that the precautionary principle is a good thing. When you read material from the US and in the English-speaking world in general, I guess, it's often assumed that the precautionary principle is a bad thing. So one of the things, and the main thing I guess that I want to do now is just try and unpack a bit what it means and basically to defend it. Yeah. Okay, now there are, I think I've come across about 150 different formulations of it in the literature, but what all of them seem to have in common is this sort of structure. If some action has some possibility of causing some harmful effect, then apply some remedy. Yeah, next one. And an example might be if discharging the waste into the river has a reasonable chance of contaminating the water, then stop the discharge. That's just a fairly simple example. There are three main issues here that I want to look at. One is the possibility P, that is the causal relationship between some action and some event. Now, the precautionary principle is usually applied in areas where there's lack of full scientific support. And that's one reason it's criticised by some people. They say, how can you stop doing something when you don't know that there's going to be a problem? Other people say, well, we have to be careful, so we can't wait till there's full scientific support. Another one is the nature of the harm, and we heard a bit about some possibilities this morning. Normally people talk about the precautionary principle if the harm from some action, from some sort of research, technological development is going to be catastrophic. And I'll mention a couple of those shortly. Perhaps irreversible. Well, if it's catastrophic, it probably will be irreversible. And the other thing is, what remedy should we apply if we think that some research is going to lead to fairly harmful results? Some people, and this is the most common approach, I guess, is to talk about halting the research or the development, but some also talk about other remedies. Okay, just saying a bit more now about the causal link. It's got to be more than a logical possibility. There's a logical possibility that all sorts of interesting things could happen, but their real possibility is so remote that we can't really worry about that. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't get around to doing anything. And the way I want to spell it out is that there has to be a credible threat, even if the evidence is weak. And the sort of example is that if there's some other example in science where some hypothesis, or we know that some action or some research has led to a bad result, even if we don't know in this case that it's going to, if there are enough similarities, then we can say, okay, there's a credible threat, we've got to see what we need to do about it. The scientific evidence might be weak, but the threat's credible because we know that in other cases there have been problems. Okay, now 3 examples that I want to look at in nanotech. The use of nanoparticles in products will possibly damage health. Developments in nanoelectronics will endanger personal privacy. And this is the grey goo problem. Nanotech research will lead to grey goo, and that will sort of gobble up all of the world. Okay, now just a bit about each of these. The nanoparticles one is seen to be a problem already because the development of products that there have been up to date in nanotechnology have tended to be in various sorts of materials, and there has been or there have been discussions about possible dangers of nanoparticles. So that is something people are worrying about already, not just in the future. Developments in nanoelectronics will endanger personal privacy. That's something where we can fairly easily extrapolate from what we know now, because we know now that technology, IT in particular, is being used to, or can be used to, endanger personal privacy, and it'll almost certainly become used in much more that way when nanoelectronics get developed. The grey goo problem is an interesting one. It's often talked about as being the most worrying of all because it could destroy all life on Earth. On the other hand, there's a lot of scientific dispute about whether it's even possible. Okay, now I want to say that in the nanoparticle case, it is a credible hypothesis, but currently there's not much evidence supporting it. The reason it's credible to say that nanoparticles can cause health problems is that we know that they do with other small particles. In Australia, there's been a lot of debate in the last few years about asbestos because we mined it in a big way and used it in a big way. And ever since, a lot of people have been dying with lung problems. So we know that little particles can cause problems. What we don't know is whether all nanoparticles of these ones that are being produced are going to cause problems. So it's a credible threat in the sense that we know that other little particles have caused problems. On the other side of the fence, of course, is the view that there are lots of nanoparticles around anywhere just naturally, and they don't cause us any problems. But the threat still does seem credible because of what we know about particles that come about because of various sorts of activity. Now, one possible remedy, of course, is just to stop using products with these particles, and there are things like sunscreens and so on currently. Another thing that we can do, and presumably should, is do more research to see whether the link really is there. Do these particles cause a lot of problems? Currently there's some evidence that they've caused problems for rats and caused problems for fish, but there's not a lot of scientific evidence around. Okay, nanoelectronics and privacy. Here the situation's a bit different because we know, we can be pretty sure the technology will be developed because it's only a further development of what we've got already. It's really enhancing information technology, enhancing it a lot, but it's not going to be, I mean, we can tell from what we've got now the direction that things are going to go to a large extent. And if we have that technology, we can almost be certain that it's going to be used in ways that reduce privacy, given that current technology is. So both of these hypotheses are credible ones. The other side of the coin here, of course, well, it's not really the other side of the coin, but the reason we know that, we can be pretty sure anyway that this technology is going to be used in ways that affect privacy is because there's a lot of pressure being put on the other way currently to try and do things to deter terrorism. So there's pressure here two ways. We have some people who are worried about privacy and are saying don't go too far in the use of the technology, and that way other people are saying, look, privacy is relatively unimportant if we're all going to get blown up, that it's a risk worth taking. Now here again, I mean, we could stop the development, but in this case, given that what we know about IT, this almost certainly won't happen. What we do probably need to do is spend a lot more time looking at legislation and safeguards. I think this is sort of a fairly weak solution, but I'm not sure there's any other one. Okay, grey goo, which is the one that people like talking about most. Some of you may have read a novel by Michael Crichton called Prey, which was all about this grey goo scenario, well, sort of about it. The view here is that in nanotechnology, self-assemblers or little machines that assemble themselves will be created artificially, but then that they'll have the ability to create more of themselves, and we won't be able to control the situation. So they'll have all of these things running around creating more of themselves, using up all the material in the world to create more of themselves, and until there's nothing left except grey goo, in Drexler's words. Now, there seem to be, well, it's not clear whether the second hypothesis then is that some of these things are going to escape if they are created and run amok, and that'll be the end of us all. The first hypothesis, on all the evidence I've been able to see, it's not clear that it's credible. It's certainly not at this stage it's not feasible yet, and a lot of scientists think that it never will be for theoretical reasons. Others aren't quite so sure. So the jury's out, but the evidence seems to be that perhaps it's not a credible hypothesis. If they were created, undoubtedly at some stage they would escape. So the second hypothesis would be credible if the first turned out to be true. Now, one of the things that people worry about here, of course, is that, okay, it might be extremely unlikely that this will ever happen, but if it did happen, it would be so devastating that we shouldn't do anything that's going to enable it to happen. And that would be the effect of applying the precautionary principle in this particular example. Okay, the precautionary principle, it seems to me, looked at this way, does help to focus attention on what the harms are in certain things in a way that cost-benefit analysis mightn't. In the case of nanoparticles, it forces us to think about what the problems are and then what we're going to do about it. And in that case, I think the threat is credible, so the principle should be applied in some way so that something is done about it, not necessarily halting the research. The privacy one, I think, we do really need there to look carefully at the way the technology is going to be used, and also probably at the way we're using IT already with respect to personal privacy. And the grey goo one, despite how dramatic it would be if it happened, I'm not so worried about it. It does seem to be fairly remote, and I think we'll probably destroy ourselves in some other way before we get that far. So that might solve the grey goo problem. But my overall view on the precautionary principle is that we do have to be careful in the way we apply it. We can't just always say, if there's a danger, okay, stop the research, which some people seem to advocate. On the other hand, I don't think that we can avoid the precautionary principle either, because I think that it does help focus attention on some fairly important things. Thanks.
Thank you.
With colours, because while a lot of nanoscientists, or pretty well all of the ones I've spoken with, aren't particularly worried about the grey goo problem, they do talk about a green goo problem, which is more the one that you're talking about, where nanotechniques are linked with various things in biology and so on, and then you get, you know, viruses or something running amok. So there is a problem. But it seems from all I've read and from the scientists I've spoken with, that it's not so much sort of a traditional grey goo problem that Drexler talks about. It's more to do with sort of once you start playing around with some of these living things. And perhaps that's the example I should have concentrated on.
It's my belief, just quickly, that you identified that different cultures have different perceptions of the precautionary principle. It's my belief that taking the public by stealth, if you like, on this issue, that the dangers have been underestimated in order to facilitate the economic development of nanotechnology.
Yeah, look, I think there's sort of an interesting point lying behind what you're saying too. The nano community in Australia and possibly in other parts of the world has been very keen on getting public discussion and ethical discussion about the technology. But one of the worrying things from my point of view is that they seem to be doing it so that there isn't a public backlash, so that the public is well educated in certain ways and will accept it. Now, I think that's a worrying aspect, and I think that's an ethical issue in itself, sort of a meta-ethical issue concerning the whole thing.
Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you. So, we're going to move on, otherwise we will, I think, all become grey goo at the end of the night. The next paper is by Irina, looking at another application of the precautionary principle, this time to neuroscience. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to thank UNESCO and Darryl for inviting me to take part in the first Bangkok Roundtable. Thank you very much. High-tech, neuroscience, neuroethics, and the precautionary principle. I've got two aims. Firstly, to draw attention to the growing array of brain fingerprinting technologies and their application in monitoring and manipulating movement, cognition, emotion, and consciousness. And my second aim in this talk is to acknowledge that modern neuroscience raises unique ethical questions which demand a precautionary approach to their application. John has very adequately spoken to us about the precautionary principle, so I really want to point out here The third point, neuroscience is an example where the precautionary principle can be applied to advantage because the principle's key element is making health-related decisions in the face of uncertainty. Neuroimaging the brain. Modern brain imaging initially focused on structure-function relationships, which are now particularly well understood. So the present research is focusing on brain function that probe thought patterns, personal sensations and perceptions, define complex cognitive behaviors and judge our rational decision-making and consciousness. Brain fingerprinting is predominantly revealed by functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, which has become routinely available in recent years. The brain mapping is achieved by setting up an advanced MRI scanner so that the increased blood flow to the activated area of the brain show up on fMRI. It's fantastic technology. I mean, you can really look at different depths and you can see which parts of the brain are active when a person is doing certain behavior patterns, and we already know the structure-functional relationships. So the technology is incredibly interesting. What really matters is the application. Any technology which is based on science and knowledge, which knowledge is ethically neutral, but its application has got ethical import. So any technology could be applied for several reasons. So brain information is represented by patterns of activity occurring over specific neuronal populations that form different tasks. Knowledge from brain interpreting science has been applied in preventing, curing and medicating brain injury. Now that's been done for some time and been very useful. New imaging now are actually reading neural organizations that drive normal and deviant human emotions. So current advances in neuroimaging can identify early signs of brain disease and risk factors for mental health, interpret personality, characteristics, and genetic predisposition to, for example, violence, addiction, cognitive abilities, desires, and even see a state of mind, for example, racial attitude, of which one is unaware, and correlate existing image patterns with future health and behavioral tendencies. These powerful technologies are now capable of manipulating the human mind for varying motives. For example, the science of branding. With the right conditions, we can condition the brain to actually look at brands where the brand name is more important than the drink. For example, dressing wounds in burn patients. If you distract the brain, you can actually reduce the pain that the patient is feeling by giving them virtual reality distraction. All these changes have been shown specifically on fMRI, that you can manipulate the brain. So the first example I want to talk about is monitoring and manipulating movements, or neuroprosthetic devices. Prosthetic devices enable paralyzed people to, for example, navigate wheelchairs or communicate by using an LCD interface to type a letter simply by thinking. The neuroprosthetic research took a long time, and it was very difficult because the scientists were actually trying to monitor the nervous output by attaching it to the motor cortex. But now new improvements in the technologies have shown that if you actually harness the prefrontal cortex rather than the motor cortex, it allows for smoother and better prosthesis. So that what they're planning now is harnessing the brain power from the planning computer movement and elaboration of thinking. So this technology will really fly ahead from now on. So second example, manipulating thoughts, consciousness and memory. Firstly, I'd like to talk a little bit about a pill to erase memory. Traumatic memories can bring on anxiety states such as post-traumatic stress disorder in susceptible people. About 20% of the population, if they're really put through horrific experiences, they cannot forget. And these memories come back in flashbacks. They used to call it collateral damage in war situations. There are drugs now which actually, these are the beta blocker group of drugs, which can block the formation of memories or weaken existing memories by interfering with the stress-mediated neurotransmitters involved in memory consolidation. This is basically driven by neuroepinephrine or neuroadrenaline, and you can see that the memory, the actual consolidation of memory involves the whole brain. So if you medicate one part of the brain, you're really having a cascade of effects throughout the whole brain. The other problem is that memories that are worthwhile keeping, which are stored in the long-term memory, these are stress-mediated neurotransmitters, and they initiate emotional reactions that best deal with an emergency and promote survival through learned experience. So the body naturally wants to remember the experiences which have got a stressful or a survival impact. And of course it's gone to a larger extent in post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now I want to talk about a pill to enhance memory. Memory-enhancing drugs target the molecular mechanisms involved in memory consolidation. Specifically, they exploit the stress-driven adrenergic system that spontaneously becomes overactive in anxiety disorders, like post-traumatic stress disorder. And this illustration shows you really that normally signals continuously flash back and forth between the thalamus and the cerebral cortex, establishing the thinking process in the long-term memories. All areas of the cerebral cortex have extensive afferent and efferent connections with the thalamus, which processes incoming information from the senses and outgoing information from the brain. So everything from the outside environment, inside environment, is processed in the thalamus and propagated to the rest of the brain. The brain works as one unit. So medicating any one bit, you're medicating the whole lot. The brain, together the prefrontal cortex and the limbic emotional brain, provide an adaptive mix of intellectual and emotional brain power. You can see the, sorry if we don't have the pointer, but the emotional brain, this is all the primitive part, this is where memories are consolidated, where the stress response is affected, and that is passed on to the intellectual or the thinking parts of the brain. So, medicating memory, the ethics. I'm not preaching any one way or another, I'm just exposing some of the possibilities, and we can discuss this later if you like. First of all, safety issues. To enhance or inhibit the natural responses of complex systems invites unforeseeable health risks, especially if neuroactive drugs are used over the long term. And secondly, memory management can be abused, for example, desensitizing combatants. You can maybe, before a battle, you can desensitize the sort of guilt and the mechanisms, the protective mechanisms, which do, in exaggeration, lead to post-traumatic stress syndrome, for example. So are you going to medicate these people so they don't feel guilt and would commit horrors that they may not otherwise do? Then there are social issues. Memories woven into our individuality and changing the emotional content dissociates the personal history from the recollected history. It's the totality of memories that promotes psychic maturity, social responsibility, and empathy for others. Second point, yet should we deny therapeutic forgetting in those suffering post-traumatic stress syndrome or memory enhancement in those suffering dementia? Third point, the difficulty is to distinguish what is dysfunctional for an individual and what is dysfunctional for society. I maintain that some of the horrors that we have committed over history should be remembered. We should not erase that from our memory. But as this is a social function, we should remember the Holocaust, for example. Yet, should the individuals who suffered from there be continued to have to suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome because of their experiences? Now, an interesting recent sort of work showing that ethics indeed seems to be hardwired in the brain. So it is a evolutionary heritage. I think most people do acknowledge that ethics is a combination of culture and biology. And with advanced fMRI, it has demonstrated that ethics is hardwired. And if you can see with the color, basically the ethics, if people are thinking about basic thoughts or moral emotions, the activation of the brain increases. So if there is, when responding to stimuli that evoke ethical or moral emotions, brain activation is consistently more powerful compared with the process of neutral, unpleasant stimuli. So that if a question has got an ethical component to it, the brain seems to light up much more than if the stimulus is unpleasant. But it's the same structures that are conceptualize this. And I want to actually finish off with a slight lighter CAT scan with thank you for listening.
Thank you, the poor cat. We're going to have some animal rights papers later on. Subrata, please.
For your very interesting and nice presentation. The question is regarding enhancement of memory. And in 60s or early 70s probably, when Raymond Moody came out with the book Life After Life, that with near-death experience people can see that what could be the hidden memory, and after that the regression therapy where the psychiatrist could bring back the memories of the past lives, and now there has come out a book which says that with the progression therapy that which could be the future lives. From the neurophysiological basis, do you think it's possible that in terms of scientific knowledge, that it is really possible that we could tap the hidden memories of our past lives, and it's also possible in terms of scientific knowledge to have kind of the potential scenario of the future, not memories because memories will past, future possibilities? Because our forefathers have all said that it is all there in the memory. If the memory is there, we remember and it is real. If we don't remember, it is unreal. For example, life in utero, we know it exists, but we don't remember. So it is just tapping the resources of hidden memories. Do you think it is possible?
It may be possible. I don't want to really make comments about past lives, but certainly with the memory as they're being consolidated, the brain works, and this I didn't have time to actually describe which parts, but it's the amygdala in the emotional brain that judges whether a memory is worth remembering, and it also controls the stress response. So that if a memory is important enough, it will then signal the hippocampus to lay it down for a consolidated memory. So memories are very labile, and there are systems that happen. Now, if a memory in time, if it's not useful anymore, the hippocampus will get removed and you will forget. So that the memory consolidation is a system that allows us to survive in the present. We use useful past experiences to actually live more effectively in the present. So there is one danger too. Psychiatrists have found out that you can have what's a false memory syndrome, where if it's adaptive to you to remember something, maybe whether it's unpleasant or pleasant or something, then the hippocampus will change the original memory to a memory that's more adaptive, and this may not resemble the truth. So that is a danger, and psychiatrists now are aware of this, I mean, for example, there have been patients who've said they've been sexually abused by an uncle or a father, and it wasn't true. But then again, you can retrieve real memories, and it might have been true. So I think memory enhancement with the tablets, it's the present. Like Ritalin actually would enhance memories, all memories, whether significant or not, under the drug. So you will remember what you had for breakfast, but that's not going to help your survival. So you're going to crowd yourself up by having a lot of consolidative memories and not that much selection under that present medication. I hope that answers your question somehow.
I mean, just related to that, then is it possible, okay, forget about past lives, is it possible to bring back the memories of life in utero?
I think that would be possible, because the term fetus and the newborn is the same. Because everything that the term fetus does, except for living outside, breathing, that sort of thing, all the systems are already ready for birth. So that transition is, it's a great transition, but in the form of development, yeah, and a lot of fetuses are born early, and they really, you know, they have to be going into incubators because they're immature. A term fetus is born large and ready to actually live outside the uterus. So the brain has got prenatal memories, and it's been shown that prenatal memories which are unpleasant do affect the offspring in the same way as pleasant ones. And I've seen pictures where the fetus actually smiles, does laughing movements, does crying movements, they suck their fingers. They're like newborn babies. So yes, they do have memories, not sophisticated ones, but they do have emotional memories.
Okay, one last question. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I shouldn't have taken so much time answering the question.
I would like to know your opinion about NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Program, now which is used as a therapeutic aspect, which is used in...
Sorry, I didn't catch the beginning.
What's your opinion about NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, now it is picking up now. It is used to enhance the thought pattern, also behavioral pattern. Now it's, it is in vogue now in the society. Program.
Oh, neuro-linguistic programs.
Programming, yes.
I don't know much about those, but I think they would be very adaptive. Children, for example, in their first 18 months, make all the sounds that a human voice is possible of making. And the only sounds that the child remembers are the ones that are being reinforced. So if you reinforce certain patterns, language patterns, repetitively, it will come into the memory. And I don't think, I mean, that's that's one of our really evolutionary gifts. I don't think that would do any harm at all.
Thank you very much.
Overloading the brain.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. It's a very interesting title, and by Mary Kalarasi on sensory abilities beyond human.
Hi everybody. I don't think it is ethical on my part to make you know the full name of mine. So I am Dr. Kalarasi from India, Lala College. My paper is on sensory abilities beyond human. Under that, I would like to discuss on the recently occurred the Sumatra disaster, the tsunami, then the sense of animals towards it, regarding the snakes or other animals and so on. The recent tsunami has brought destructions of apocalyptic proportions in South Asia. Nearly many died, many precious lives we lost. Next. This is to show the tsunami scenes. The questions asked from every field of human knowledge. Here the questions asked from every field of human knowledge to understand what has happened and how it has happened, to know how to cope with aftermath, how to focus such happenings and prevent or reduce the magnitude of the destruction and so on. The terrible tsunami hit on December 26. The mighty earthquake of December 26 near Sumatra that caused the terrible tsunami was unprecedented both in scale and location. It is said that there could have been some time for issuing some warnings to the coastline population had the tsunami detection mechanisms had been in place. But the Indian Ocean region had not witnessed tsunami attacks in the past as the region of Pacific Ocean. Hence, the Asian countries have not gone for the very expensive technology of tsunami warning. Therefore, there seems hardly any justifiable reason to blame anybody except perhaps God. Moreover, if we believe in a God who is totally transcendental, utterly omnipotent and omniscient, then we will only expect him to intervene mightily and miraculously stop such natural disasters and the accompanying destructions. But we cannot forget that God is also immanently present as a loving and compassionate parent. Hence, God is actually participating in the cosmic and human fertilities, while at the same time enabling the universe along with everything and every living creature in it to march towards the full participation in the divine fullness. And this is just the total number estimated deaths during tsunami. Next. Regarding the sense of animals, they have identified that there's going to be some disaster some 2-3 hours before, and it has been reported that animals fleeing the deadly tsunami surge before it struck Asia and Africa are near legendary. Animals possess a sixth sense that may have saved them from the huge waves spawned by the massive 9.0 earthquake off the coast of Sumatra. Animal behavior experts and scientists say it is probably overplaying it to suggest that creatures of wild or psychic, but they do agree that animals can hear and feel things that human cannot. Next. Next. At least nothing we can measure at this point, said Diana Rice, Director of Marine Mammal Research at Wildlife Conservation Society, based at the Bronx Zoo in New York City. Animals have very refined senses. In many species, they have sensory abilities beyond ours. For years, scientists have been trying to determine whether those sensory abilities can someday be captured and used by humans and their governments for detecting natural disasters. And of course, to say that snakes can also detect the earthquakes before. Researchers in China have found that some animals like snakes can detect earthquakes in advance. I don't know that it's something that can be quantified and repeatedly observed, said Ravi Korea, President Founder of the Sri Lanka Wildlife Conservation Society. And of course, there are some evidences that have been reports to say in Sri Lanka and Thailand of elephants running for the hills up to an hour before tsunami, before down on their coastal lands. In Sri Lanka's second largest wildlife reserve, Yala National Park, people reportedly observed 3 elephants running away from the shore area to higher ground an hour before tsunami hit, Korea said. There were other reports that elephants in Thailand carried tourists on their backs to safety before the coastal areas were inundated. So this is to say the elephants. The elephants can both respond to and can also produce the infrasound. Rice and Correa said, elephants can both respond to and to produce infrasound, sound at a lower frequency than human beings can hear. Other mammals with a similar captivity include certain types of whales. It's possible that geographic upheavals create low-frequency sounds that are not audible to us, but for an elephant, it absorbs the sound waves and can hear them, said Correa. Birds, monkeys, dogs, and other creatures were all reportedly acting differently on the morning of December 26th. No report of animal carcasses. There have been no reports of elephant carcasses, deer, leopards, black bears, sloth bears, Correa said. He drove through towns like Gali, which are full of stray animals, and didn't see any dead cows or goats. Animals might be highly sensitive to their environments, but they also look to other animals for cues, and there is danger coming, according to Correa. But some scientists have scoffed at the notion that animals have super sense and doubt they survive in large numbers that others have suggested. Animals were found to be very active half an hour before the wave came. Very active about half an hour before the wave came. Doberman cyclists refused to go their daily jog along the beach about 90 minutes before the tsunami, on which they were very fond of. Correa also heard a story about visitors to the park who were trying to feed bananas to some of the monkeys when the tsunami came ashore, and the monkeys turned their noses up literally. Bananas would be something normally that would make monkeys go bananas, he said. These monkeys were totally disinterested, starting up in a confused mode as if they were reacting to something. And of course, dogs also refused to go for a daily walk. And of course, they were not reacting as usual before tsunami. Rats also showed a very peculiar attitudinal behavior. This has happened in Valangani. The public observed the rats showing a very peculiar attitudinal behavior on the day of tsunami. Their movements were towards higher land level through all means. They were using staircase to reach upstairs 2 hours before tsunami as soon as they sensed the terrific disaster. Of course, this is it. Next. Birds were also found restless before 2 hours of tsunami. And of course, we understood that animals sense danger earlier than human. It has been the elephants during 2 small tremors, and on both occasions the elephants ran in alarm several seconds before I felt the tremor, Pollard said. One of the world's most earthquake-prone countries in Japan, where devastation has taken countless lives and caused enormous damage to property. Researchers there have long studied animals in hopes of discovering what they hear or feel before the earth shakes. They hope that animals may be used as a prediction tool. Animals sense danger earlier than human, of course, continued. There have been documented cases of strange animals' behavior prior to the earthquake. But the United States Geological Survey, a government agency that provides scientific information about the earth, says a reproducible connection between a specific behavior and the occurrence of a quake has never been made. What we are faced with is a lot of antidotes, said Andy Michael in the SGS. Animals react to so many things, being hungry, defending their territories, mating, predators, so it's hard to have a controlled study to get that advanced warning signal.